In 2011, DC Comics relaunched their entire line under the New 52 initiative. However, unlike the Rebirth initiative in 2016 and the Infinite Frontier initiative starting in March of this year, the New 52 was a hard reboot of DC continuity, starting all of DC's history, aside from Batman and Green Lantern, from scratch. This meant big characters' lengthy histories were erased and built from the ground up, typically with quite a few changes. Often these changes were controversial, and one such hot topic was the spirit of truth herself, Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is my favorite superhero. She always has been, she always will be. I think that in a lot of conversations about Wonder Woman, we discuss her strength, her power, and those are important things to talk about. She is the most powerful female hero. However, what makes Diana special does not begin and end with her being as powerful as she is. That's an aspect of her character, and an important one at that, but it is not what makes her great. Her womanhood is also not everything that she is. It's a core aspect of her character. She is Wonder Woman, after all, but she's so much more than just a strong woman or a strong female hero. And I think that's lost on a lot of writers. There's often a focus on writing a strong woman, but it's often forgotten who Diana is as a person. And I think that's a shame. So who is Wonder Woman? To explain this, I need to explain the intentions of her creator. Superhero comics are often violent. They've got bad guys and punching and big fight scenes. And Wonder Woman comics are no exception. They also have bad guys and punching and big fight scenes, but they're not about violence or fighting. When William Moulton Marston created Wonder Woman, he set out to create a superhero who didn't solve problems with violence, but with love. He was also quite the feminist, and Wonder Woman was a pretty radical feminist character for her time. William Moulton Marston believed that all evil came from men, and that mankind could only be cleansed of his sins by submission to a loving feminine authority. Marston also invented an early prototype of the lie detector. This all came together to create Wonder Woman, a superhero that fought with love and truth, that came from the all-female utopia of Paradise Island, and came to man's world as an ambassador of peace, to spread her Amazon ideals of love and equality. In her classic origin story, Wonder Woman was created from clay. Paradise Island was strictly female, so there was no way to reproduce, but Queen Hippolyta yearned for a child so desperately that she molded one from clay, and prayed to the gods to grant it life. And they did. The Greek goddesses granting Diana life and giving her abilities far beyond even the Amazons had. Marston's loving feminine authority to cleanse mankind of his sins was Wonder Woman. This is why the bondage imagery of her tying up her enemies with her lasso, forcing them to speak the truth, is so powerful. Her enemies are defeated through submission, sometimes through violence, but equally as often through diplomacy. And while she is saving mankind from her villains, oftentimes she's also saving her villains from themselves. It's notable that Diana's weapons are inherently pacifistic. Unlike other weapons, her lasso is non-lethal. It's not a sword or a bow and arrow or a gun. It doesn't pierce, it subdues. Her bracelets are another example. She doesn't shoot back, she merely deflects bullets off of her. It's merely defense. Even her flying shows her pacifism. When Superman flies, he uses his brute strength to propel himself through the air, defying gravity, defying physics. His arms thrust forward, his hands balled into fists, punching through the air. When Wonder Woman flies, she's not defying anything. Oftentimes, her flying is written as her riding air currents, not propelling herself through the air, but working with the air, becoming one with the wind. Her arms are outstretched to the side like a bird with wings, riding the currents to get her where she needs to go. Wonder Woman leads with compassion, love being the well from which she pulls her strength. She takes down her enemies often without violence, her lasso wielding the weapon of truth, which she uses to show her enemies the error of their ways. This is who she is. This is Wonder Woman. So, how does Brian Azzarello write her? When Brian Azzarello started his Wonder Woman run in 2011, he set out to do a wildly different take on the character. His run would shake the character to her very core. She got a brand new origin, a brand new supporting cast, brand new villains, and she and all the Greek gods got brand new designs. Everything was brand new. But is brand new good? This take on Wonder Woman is violent, crude, cynical. She punches first, asks questions later. This isn't the Wonder Woman I know, not the kind, compassionate, graceful superhero, But this is a trap that a lot of writers fall into when characterizing her, especially male writers, when they try to focus on the strong woman aspect of her character and view strength through the narrow lens of brute strength. But Wonder Woman's strength comes from her love. Her strongest weapons are compassion and truth, and that's the point that Brian Azzarello seems to miss. There are certain points where the love and truth aspects of her character come up, but they're few and far between, and in a lot of ways, seem out of character for this version of Diana. This book fails to deliver on even basic aspects of Diana's character. Throughout the 35-issue run, only once did Diana use the lasso of truth to compel the truth out of someone. The lasso is used for almost purely offensive purposes throughout the run as a force of destruction, and this militant portrayal of Wonder Woman carries through. Throughout the run, she uses guns, scythes, spears, and most notably swords. I'd wager to say that the swords are used just as much, if not more often, than the lasso, a strong departure from the pacifist superhero Diana was intended to be. Her bracelets are also completely changed. Instead of being a symbol of her strength, they're a symbol of restraint, and they're keeping her from realizing her true power. She only realizes her true strength when she does away with her own iconography, removing the bracelets. A lot of times in comic fandom, when talking about characters, accuracy is brought up, and held up as what adaptations need to aspire to. If something isn't accurate, it's bad, though I don't think that's necessarily true. Some characters just aren't good, or outdated, or offensive, or boring, and need to be changed when writing them in the future, or adapting them into other media. Some media just has unique takes on characters, and while not super accurate, is still really interesting, and definitely deserves to exist, and I don't think that changing them makes those takes inherently bad. Often, these are the best portrayals of the characters. So I'm not going to try and make the case that this take on Wonder Woman, her lore is different, therefore it's bad. Different doesn't mean bad, different just means different. Some of my favorite Wonder Woman stories are wildly different takes. However, when you're writing a character with as big of a history as Wonder Woman, and that means as much to so many people as she does, you do have to honor her history, and you do have to honor what she means, because it means a lot, and she means a lot. And I don't think that this portrayal does that. When there are different takes on good characters, they do still honor what those characters mean. Or, if they don't, they're in a completely different world where that take won't impact the original version of the character people love. However, Brian Azzarello's Wonder Woman does neither of these things. This take is so far gone from what Wonder Woman typically is that it definitely does not honor what she means, but also it was what the main version of Wonder Woman was from 2011 to 2014. So it wasn't just a wildly different take, it was a wildly different take that was directly replacing the version people loved, and people didn't love that. So, all in all, Brian Azzarello's characterization of Wonder Woman, not great. It disrespects her character and her history, but a lot of Diana's characterization throughout her history is rooted in the Amazon way, in her Amazon ideals. So, if this is what Wonder Woman is to him, then what does he think the Amazon ideals are? The Amazons are a warrior race of women from Greek mythology, and they are the race Diana comes from. While in Greek mythology they are brutal, savage warriors, in DC Comics they're portrayed completely different. They are peaceful warriors, living on the island of Themyscira, spreading the Amazon message, Wonder Woman's message, of love and equality. While peaceful warriors might seem like a contradictory idea, around the time that Wonder Woman was created, strong women also seemed contradictory. And yet these days, that's a common phrase, so take that into account. In George Perez's run, widely considered to be the greatest Wonder Woman run of all time, and undeniably the most definitive Wonder Woman run, the Amazons, an all-female race of peaceful warriors, reincarnated from women whose lives were lost to male violence, were created by the Greek goddesses and Hermes to spread their message of love and peace back during the era of ancient Greece, to counteract Ares' way of hate and war. They were the goddesses' ambassadors to mankind, but mankind wasn't ready to listen to women, and Hercules' men sought to take them down. Hercules came to the Amazon city ready for violence, but after being bested by Hippolyta in combat, he greeted the Amazons as friends, though this was merely deception. The Amazons were drugged and then raped and tortured. But when they broke out of their chains, they fought back, defeating Hercules and his men. And they realized that man's world was not ready for them, that mankind didn't deserve their help or their love. And so they went into hiding, going to the secluded island of Themyscira, hidden away from the rest of man's world, keeping their gifts to themselves. The Amazons wear their bracelets to commemorate what had happened to them, what drove them to seclusion, to never forget the horrors man world committed against them. In seclusion, they've created the perfect society. In Greg Rucka's 2003 run, they're described as the most technologically and socially advanced civilization on the planet. And when Wonder Woman comes to man's world, she spreads those Amazon ideals to make the world a better place. In Greg Rucka's 2016 run, the Amazons are updated further to be an exclusively queer culture, Themyscira not just being an all-female utopia, but a specifically lesbian utopia. The Amazons have a beautiful, thorough history, and what they mean is vital to Wonder Woman. But Brian Azzarello's characterization of them is wildly different, and he falls into a common bad Wonder Woman trope that male writers fall into, where they assume that because the Amazons don't have men on their island, they must be evil man-hating bigots. But it's like, sir, this is Lesbian Island. What are you going to do on Lesbian Island? The Amazons, he writes, are cruel, mean women. They're violent, they're aggressive, and most of all, they hate men. Completely the opposite of what DC's version of them was intended to be. But that's how they're written in this comic, and while it's a bad Wonder Woman trope, I don't think it completely comes out of nowhere. While George Perez's Wonder Woman is widely considered to be the greatest Wonder Woman run of all time, oftentimes the takeaway from it is completely different from what actually made it great. Greek mythology was a huge part of that run, and while it was a lot of fun, it wasn't what made it great. Wonder Woman was what made it great. Her ideals of love and truth and how the comic was about those things is what made it great. But I can definitely see how a writer could read the comics and be like, George Perez's Wonder Woman run was great. It had a lot of Greek mythology. Therefore, for my Wonder Woman one to make it great, I need to include even more Greek mythology. However, this conclusion is to the detriment of the Amazons, and it's made all the worse by the conclusion about Amazon babies. In the original Wonder Woman lore, as well as in George Perez's run, and all Wonder Woman runs before Brian Azzarello's, Diana was the only Amazon child. They were all immortal and a society of strictly women, so no children were born, but Hippolyta wanted a child so badly that she sculpted one from clay. While the other Amazons had seen man's world and chose to reject it, Diana hadn't, and she had an Ariel-esque need to see the world beyond. And eventually she did, coming to man's world as Wonder Woman. However, in Brian Azzarello's run, Diana is not the only Amazon child. In fact, there are many Amazon children, and this was what sealed the fate of the Amazons he wrote. In his run, every 30-ish years, the Amazons would go out and board sailors' ships. They sleep with the men to become pregnant, and after they have their way with the men, they kill them. In 9 months, the girl children are raised as Amazons, and the male children are sold to Hephaestus as slaves to work in his forge. This takes the Amazons, these feminist icons in DC Comics, and turns them into horrific people. It turns these women into the oppressors of men. While rare, there's a recurring trope of stories like these in the media, where the oppressed become the oppressors. The new TV series Noughts and Crosses coming out in March comes to mind. However, I doubt that this is as good of an idea as some people seem to think. In this instance, it takes feminist icons and turns them into oppressors of men, alienating the women in the audience and pushing away so many Wonder Woman fans who the Amazons mean a lot to. And it doesn't really teach men anything about sexism. It just creates a story where the evil feminazis are oppressing the men, and it's not great. Azzarello takes these distinctly feminist characters and makes them into something not at all feminist, and he does the same with Diana's origin. Perhaps the most memorable thing about this run, the most controversial change to Wonder Woman's character, was the change to her origin. For 70 years, Wonder Woman's origin had stayed the same, that her mother Hippolyta had molded her out of clay, that she was the perfect Amazon because no male seed led to her creation, because she was born of her mother and her mother alone. Going back to William Moulton Marston's feminism, because men were the root of all evil, the kindest, most compassionate person, the perfect person, must have been the product of only women. Made by women and women alone, or raised by women and women alone. The story was intrinsic to her character. But Brian Azzarello changed it. Instead of being built from clay, she was flesh and blood. The idea of her having been created with no male seed was changed into her being created with the peak male seed. She was made into a demigod, a daughter of the king of the gods, Zeus. Her strength came from Zeus now. Previously, she had been gifted with her powers by the Greek goddesses, but now she was the strongest Amazons because she had a god's blood running through her veins. All of her strength, her speed, her flight, it all came from the fact that she was the daughter of Zeus. There are several problems with this update to her origin story. Wonder Woman's origin story, the fact that she was created only by women, the fact that her powers came from women, this is not a coincidence. It was showing the strength of women, the fact that a character with all the strength of Superman had this strength because of, not in spite of, her womanhood. But with the Zeus origin story, this is stripped away from her. Instead, her powers come from the man. The fact that she's an Amazon, the fact that she's a feminist icon, this is all pushed to the wayside. And as the source of her power becomes a man, and not just any man, Zeus, a historically rapey and misogynistic god. This guy is the source of all her powers. Yikes. Like that one time you turned into a duck to rape a girl. Look up Lena and the Swan. It's so fucked up, I swear. This also has some eugenicsy undertones. I'll probably get into this more when I eventually do my Superman video, but there was a running gag in the comics fandom that originated from a 1969 essay called Man of Steel, Woman of Kleenex, which detailed the perceived sexual issues that someone like Superman with all his powers would have with a human woman like Lois Lane. However, this is a fundamental misreading of Superman as a character, imposing hyperrealism onto a character which inherently relies on suspension of disbelief. This essay is, of course, humorous, but as the joke continued in the Superman fandom, some began to take it seriously, and it all reached a head when a dumb joke got made into canon fact, as Superman and Wonder Woman became a couple in the New 52. The idea that these heroes are so far above humans that they must be with people of their similar strength is tied to eugenics. The idea that some people are genetically superior, therefore they are of more value, and those that are viewed as genetically inferior to them of lesser value and not worthy of them. This is a eugenics mindset, and it's the same mindset used by white supremacists to justify their racism. They believe that white people are superior to other races, and that's where their racism comes from, particularly their anti-blackness. I'm not saying that this parries literal Nazism, or that Brian Azzarello, the DC writers, and the DC editors that put this together are racist. But what I am saying is, if you look at the philosophy that put this pairing together and the implications of that philosophy, I don't think you'd be too pleased. So how does this tie into the Zeus origin story? The Zeus origin story is another example of eugenics when coming to this character. Diana is not the greatest Amazon because she was raised among the Amazons, taught the Amazon way from infancy to adulthood. She is the greatest Amazon because she has genetically superior blood running through her veins. While all the other Amazons were fathered by human men, Diana was fathered by a god. And that's why she's Wonder Woman. That's why she's the best. And that's not a good reason. I get that Greek mythology in a lot of ways is inherently problematic. I'm not going to pretend that it isn't. But that's what makes Wonder Woman so special. In a lot of ways, she's an anomaly. Such a feminist character coming from a myth about evil savage women called the Amazons. And then even on a wider scale, in superhero comics, a genre dominated by men, a genre dominated by violence, and the fact that a female hero who fights with love and truth, a pacifist hero, is one of the most popular superheroes, it's truly remarkable. I remember watching a ContraPoints video where Natalie Wynn mentioned that her brand was deriving low conclusions from edgy premises, and I think that's an observation that can be very well placed onto Wonder Woman. She comes from these things that aren't very feminist and comes out of them being hella feminist, and I think that's pretty cool. And I don't think Brian Azzarello gets that. Throughout this video, I've talked a lot about Diana on a personal level, but I want to bring attention to her supporting cast. Throughout her history, Diana has had an amazing supporting cast. From the Amazons such as Hippolyta, Philippus, Penelope, and Io, to her human allies like Steve Trevor, Etta Candy, Professor Julia Capolettis, and her daughter, Vanessa Capolettis, to her Wonder family with heroes like Donna Troy, Artemis Abana Migdal, and Wonder Girl's Cassie Sandsmark, and even her wide array of villains, Cheetah, Giganta, Dr. Psycho, Circe, and many more. Diana has a wide array of supporting characters, both working with and against her. This comic uses virtually none of her prior supporting cast members, instead opting to use brand new characters or new interpretations of characters who typically were not part of Diana's supporting cast. Zola is a brand new character and is kind of the main plot device in this run. From the start, Zeus had gone missing, but he left Zola pregnant with his child. As the gods scramble for power in Zeus's absence, many wanting to seize his throne, Hera, in her jealous rage, wants to kill Zola and her unborn child. Much of the early issues of this run are about Diana protecting Zola from the wrath of a jealous god. However, despite being a plot device, Zola is an incredible character. She's funny, she's endearing, she lights up every scene that she's in. She's not as physically powerful as the other characters, but she doesn't sit back. She takes an active role in the story, even after she gives birth to her son Zeke, and she's full of personality. Near the end of the run, it's revealed that she was the vessel for the gods, and Athena was reborn in Zola. Athena was ready to take 4 months again, which meant that she would replace Zola, but Wonder Woman pleaded with Athena not to take Zola away. I pray to your wisdom. What you name a vessel has proven to be so much more. She is kind, she is clever, she is honorable and forgiving and witty, and every life she's touched is better because in the midst of chaos, she showed us humanity. We've seen what kind of monsters we gods create when love is denied. Zeke needs his mother. He needs Zola, and so do I. With Diana's new origin story as the daughter of Zeus, she gained quite a bit of family, including some half-siblings who were also the offspring of Zeus and a human woman. Those being Lennox, Soraka, Milan, and Cassandra. And I'm going to touch on each of them, starting with Lennox. He is the most prominent of Diana's siblings, following her through a good part of his run, before dying in issue 22. His powers manifested in his skin having the same consistency as a rock, and he's a chain-smoking, rough-and-tumble, manly man. This is a weird dynamic for Diana, and one that I see quite often, where writers think it's a good idea to pair her with these rude, condescending, borderline misogynistic, sometimes not even borderline, guys. And I don't know why they think this is a good idea. But this is yet another example of that. Soraka and Cassandra are Diana's sisters. Soraka having the ability to control the wind, and Cassandra the ability to mind control people with her voice, though Cassandra had her abilities taken away from her. I don't have much to say on them, but I think they're enjoyable characters. Lastly is Milan. I'm not going to speak much on Milan, though I do think it's a strange choice that Diana's only black sibling is a homeless man living in the dump, a fate that's not given to any of her non-black siblings or any non-black characters in this run. Despite my critiques, I don't actually dislike these characters, even Lennox. What I do dislike is the impact of their existence on this run. Diana's half-brothers and sisters, children of Zeus, take the place of Diana's Amazon sisters on Themyscira. Characters like Philippus, Penelope, Eubea, and Io are completely removed from the lore to be replaced with these new characters who, while they do have some merit, just aren't as good. While Hippolyta is still here, she turned into stone for the majority of the run, and the only Amazon that is prominent is Aleka, who is just about every bad take on Amazons rolled into one. The Greek gods also get major makeovers throughout this run, and I'm not gonna lie, I love most of these redesigns. As a fan of George Perez's run, the new designs for Hermes and Eris are a bit eyebrow-raising, but I actually like them quite a bit, and Brian Azzarello's take on Eris is actually my preferred version of the character. Though there are 2 changes in particular that I want to critique. The first is Ares, who, in most of Diana's origin stories, is her villain. Diana, a representation of truth and love. Ares, the god of war, a representation of hatred and lies. He's one of her great big villains, and this run turns him into one of her allies. And while I get the appeal of turning a villain into an ally, that's subversion of expectations, it muddles the message and the core idea of Wonder Woman, which is only further muddled by making the main villain at the start of the series, Hera. She's always been one of Diana's patron goddesses. Wonder Woman utters great Hera so many times, and this comic demonizes Hera, making her the villain of the series. While Hera is a bit problematic in Greek mythology, Wonder Woman has woke conclusions from edgy premises, so I don't think just because she can be made evil means she should be made evil. Fans of this run would remind me that she does get a redemption arc, but by that point, the damage is already done. Finally, Orion, the new god, son of Highfather, joins Diana's supporting cast, and oh boy, I have some opinions about him. So basically, he's just there to harass Diana constantly throughout this run. He calls her legs and is constantly disrespecting her, speaking condescendingly towards her, and at one point smacks her on the ass without consent. And through all of this, she just lets it happen, at one point actually rewarding his behavior by kissing him. It's really bad. I've talked at length throughout this video about the various ways that Brian Azzarello's Wonder Woman run fundamentally misunderstands Diana and her lore, how it has plenty of bad Wonder Woman takes, and how, overall, it's just not good Wonder Woman. But I feel like it'd be dishonest for me to pretend like I hate the run, because I don't. Brian Azzarello is a very talented writer, and I don't have any hate in my heart for him or for this comic. Even if it's a bad Wonder Woman comic and a problematic comic on its own, it's still an amazing read, and I do recommend that people check it out. The art by Cliff Chang is absolutely fantastic, stunning, and the story is compelling and ambitious, with an absolutely infectious, adventurous spirit. The run was the run that pulled me headfirst into the world of comics, that made me fall hopelessly in love with the medium. So, I can't pretend to hate it. I don't. I love it. However, I also can't pretend that these issues don't exist, because they absolutely do, and I've dedicated this video to pointing them out. Its introduction of the sword to her weaponry, as well as the Zeus origin story, have been actively detrimental to her character. I can't stop loving this comic, and I can't stop seeing the flaws either. And every time I read it, which I've done many, many times, both of these things are equally present in my mind. After George Perez's run and Guy Rocca's runs, I'd say that Brian Azzarello's run is right behind them as far as greatest Wonder Woman runs of all time. Each of these runs has taught me a lot about the character, and I've learned a lot from them. I feel like it's easy to criticize media. You see something, you say something, you cancel it. However, I don't want to just criticize. I don't want to be like, thing bad and then pat myself on the back and be done with my day. If I'm going to bring up problems with something, I need to bring up solutions as well. So here it is. Here's how I would do my Wonder Woman run. When I think about what kind of writer I want to be, I definitely want to be an architect. I want to build up my character and their lore, build upon the foundations, and build my character up to greater things in the future. And so looking at Wonder Woman, what in her history should have happened, but just hasn't happened yet. And I think one of the major things hindering Wonder Woman is the fact that the Amazons are still isolated. There's only so many stories you can tell with the current setup, so in my run I want to build up to the Amazons' return to man's world. So my thought process is, what would build up to that? And what would be a story that would be so important that would be worthy of their return? And so the first act of my run would build up to an arc I'm calling Ares War, which would be my take on the classic Wonder Woman story, Gods and Monsters, where Ares attempts to start another world war and seize the throne of Olympus. Diana's foes throughout this act will include Cheetah, Decay, Devastation, Eris, Phobos, Demios, Medusa, Circe, and of course, Ares himself. The Wonder Fam, Donna, Cassie, Artemis, Diana, and Hippolyta would all come together to take on this threat, and supporting characters like Professor Julia Capoletti's, Steve Trevor, and Etta Candy would come back into the fold, being vital to the story. A celebration of her past, present, and future. And it would all culminate in the Amazons once again returning to man's world as the heroes that they are, as ambassadors of peace, bringing their Amazon message of love and peace to man's world alongside Diana. Act 2 of my run would explore the impact of their return, reinvent and bring back a lot of old Wonder Woman characters, and I have a big story involving Nubia planned, but I don't want to give away too much. Marie Javins, you can contact me at any time. I'm always open to write a comic for DC. Just saying. This is crazy. I finally finished editing this video. It took me way longer than I thought it would, but I'm really happy with how it came out. I definitely learned a lot through the process of making it. I think it's a lot better than the last video, and hopefully the next video will be better than this. If you want, you can follow me on Twitter, link down below. I also found this website that shows you local comic book shops in your area. You just put your zip code in and it shows you the shops with directions, which I think is really cool. Comic writers and artists are kind of small business people and they aren't making huge amounts of money. So I'm really passionate about directly supporting comic writers and artists and buying their work because I think it's a really rad thing to do. So yeah, there's also a lot of new comic runs that I'm excited about that are starting in March. And these are all really great jumping on points. So I will link those in the description where you can find more information about those. Also, Wonder Woman runs that I really like, I will link you the Amazon links for those down below. But I do implore you to purchase from a local comic book shop because it's super important to support small businesses. Thank you so much for watching and listening to my awkward little voice. If you liked the video, hit the like button, comment, and share with your friends. It helps me out a lot. And if you want to see more content, subscribe maybe. Alright, bye.